This is going to be, I don't think this will be to that extreme, but there are a lot of agents in fear right now, which we already know the numbers. You know, like I said, the 15% of agents doing 75% of the business. Maybe that 15% of the agents will now do 80% of the business, because some of those 85% of agents are going to fall off. There are 3 million agents in the U.S., 1.6 million NAR members. They're projecting that they're going to lose hundreds of thousands of members. That's what they're projecting, 20%. That NAR is projecting they might lose 20%, which would be about 320,000 members that they're projecting losing. And they don't just quit NAR, they give up their license. You know, they don't renew. And you know, and in a business that has an 87% failure rate anyway, you know, we're talking about the people that may have already surpassed that. So for a brand new agent that's getting in, you know, as JB mentioned, you don't have that, you know, or even an agent that maybe has been in business but now is maybe taking it seriously and going to get started. You don't have that the way it used to be, you know, mindset. There's nothing holding you back other than you. You know, you can do this. So just to review a couple of little things that that were previously covered, but just some of the slides that I made. This lawsuit, this settlement, again, first and foremost, is proposed. So we'll just start with that. This is not set in stone. This is a long ways to go. I'm not sure, you know, and they didn't mention it, but I'm not sure that it will be settled by this proposed July date that we're talking about. Doesn't mean you shouldn't still act as if, okay? You don't want to wait. Some people will wait until they've read it all and thought about it and, you know, everything else. You want to start making adjustments. Now, the good news is that for, you know, as Corey said, the agents that the agents here in our office, we've been doing this for 10 years. We've been talking, you get a buyer brokerage, and I only recently started, I only recently, probably in the last 2 years, started doing the one showing thing. Before, we would have an initial meeting. If you wanted to see a house in, you know, by you know, Cleveland Park Zoo, I would meet at the Starbucks across the street from the zoo. I've done several of those in that people want to look at the house in the neighborhood. We're going to meet at the nearest Starbucks. I have my laptop. We do a quick thing. This is how you hire me, you know. And and you can fire me at any time. You can hire me today. You can fire me tomorrow. I'm fine with that. So hire me today. We could look at the house. You can fire me tomorrow. No further obligation. The way that we've always taught it is that, you know, this is a hiring document, which is the buyer agency agreement. You know, this is you deciding to hire us. First, you've articulated your value already before we get to this point. Because if you haven't been able to articulate your value, it doesn't matter if the compensation is 0. They're not signing it. You can say, oh, because some agents will say, oh, you know, I work for free. That's what they were saying. You won't be able to say that anymore. Some agents will say, I work for free, which basically they're implying that I'm going to get paid from the seller. You don't have to worry, but don't worry about that. I work for free. Now, if you say I work for free, that means if there is compensation being paid by the seller, that compensation is either negated, you give it back, or it's going to go to your buyer. You don't get it. If you work for free, it's free. So no one's going to, you know, you shouldn't be saying that. Shouldn't have really been saying it anyway, but shouldn't be saying it. So the way that I have always taught, this is our agency agreement. This is how you hire me. And would have already explained agency, the difference between a buyer's agent and a listing agent. Just like if you went to court for a traffic ticket, you wouldn't go to the prosecutor that's trying to get you to, you know, to pay the $200 fine and get 2 points on your license. You wouldn't go and say, oh, hey, Mrs. Prosecutor, whew, I'll tell you, you got me. I was going 110. But see what you can do talk to the judge and see what you can do. I'll be over here on my defendant side of the table. It doesn't work that way. The prosecution has an attorney. The defense has an attorney. The plaintiff, in that case the government, or in a lawsuit, the plaintiff has his or her attorney that he or she pays. The defense has his or her attorney that he or she pays. That's the way it is in every industry, in real estate, for whatever, they think it's different. So the way that I explain it is I say, hey, this is our fee. I'm going through, this is our hiring document. It's got your name, got our name, this is our brokerage, this is our address, contact information. You can feel free to read through this. I do a 6-month agreement because I don't want to pressure you into having to hurry and buy a house. So the opposite of the 48-hour. I say, listen, there's no pressure. You'll buy a house when you're ready to buy a house. I'm here to serve. I do a 6-month agreement. But the good news is that, and you can cancel at any time. Buyer can cancel at any time without penalty. Now, of course, if we find a house and we're under contract with the house, that's different. But up until that time, we can look at 30 houses. And then you can say, you know what, Melvin? It's Tuesday. It's a little gloomy outside. You're fired. I just don't, That's fine. This is our fee, as outlined here. We charge 3.5%, and there's a $495 broker flat fee. That's the fee that we charge for the service that we provide. The good news is that oftentimes the seller pays most, and in some cases, all of the fee. Sound like a good deal? And they'll say, oh, I guess that's a good deal. No, it's a great deal. I wish I could live my whole life that way. What if I went to the grocery store and my groceries were $140 and the person in line in front of me said, I'll pay $100 and I only had to pay $40. Or I took my car to the mechanic shop and they said, yeah, Melvin, it's going to be $1,350 to get your car fixed. And the next person said, I'll pay $1,000, I only had to pay $350. No, it's a great deal. Someone else is paying most and maybe all of your fee. And then they're like, yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. And then I move on. I don't spend a lot of time on the fee. This is our fee. Typically, we'll pay some or all of the fee. But whatever the difference is, you're responsible for. That's all. You're responsible for the difference. So if a buyer says, well, is that negotiable? My answer, everything's negotiable. But that's not typically the negotiation is done after the fact. You can always reduce the fee. You can't increase the fee. So you can't, before you could increase the fee. Before this new rule, a part of this rule is not increasing the fee. And when I say, so what most agents that do get buyer agencies signed, most agents, they leave the compensation blank. And in their mind, they're thinking that it's whatever the listing is paying. But that actually is not correct. If it's blank, that's zero. So they're not supposed to get any compensation. Now, you can always reduce it. So you might say, because when push comes to shove and it's the day before closing and the buyer's, calling all around, auntie, grandma, and trying to get the funds together, and they're, $1,726 short, which if you've done, that happens, then you can, 5 minutes before settlement, you can say, okay, we'll reduce the fee. Or, or however that works out. Sometimes the buyers will say they're short and not really be short, but just to try to squeeze at the end. But yes, that your articulation of that is accurate. So, again, proposed settlement. It's going to affect 1 million members. Again, not affiliated with Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire Hathaway is one, they're not agreeing to this. This is a good settlement. This is a good settlement. As I said, this is a good settlement for agents. It's not really asking anything different than what we do. Getting the paperwork signed, getting hired, not working for free, being the big V, as Marie Dias would say, volunteer. Being professional. Like I can't, again, realtors, you can't show up at your doctor's office or your dentist's office whenever you want, or call your doctor and say, hey, I want to come in for a cleaning today. Like, it doesn't work. You have an appointment. They give you a clipboard. There's paperwork you fill out before that. They verify your insurance. All of those things, just being professional, that a lot of agents don't do. And so it's going to force agents to step up and be a little more professional. Again, and also Berkshire Hathaway is not another reason they're one, like he said, they're trying to extract more cash from Berkshire, but also Berkshire is holding out because they don't feel that they have to pay anything, because by nature sellers sign a binding arbitration agreement, and there have been no cases, it's gone all the way to the Supreme Court, that if you sign a binding arbitration agreement, you can't sue in court. You have to go to binding arbitration first. So that's a part of their angle. They're saying they're not paying. And also they don't want to settle with them because they think they can get more. Berkshire thinks they don't have to pay anything. So their position is that you guys settle over there. We're going to fight this till the end. That's Berkshire's position. Again, the changes should take effect the end of July. And it's going to be $418 million over 4 years. And these are the three main lawsuits. All the copycats, again, the seller suits. The buyer plaintiff suits are still are going to be separately covered. So, the old way, again, still proposed, but the old way, buyer brokerage commissions in the MLS, there had to be they recently changed it where you could put zero. You could have always put $1. And I'll say this, longer than that, 2007-ish, when the market was really hot, in 2007, I saw $500 flat fees on buyer compensation, buyer agent compensation. I saw that with my eyes. And just like if you think about like Ryan Homes right now, the largest new home builder in our area, it doesn't matter if it's a $300,000 house, if that exists, or a $1.3 million house, they pay a flat $3,000 commission. Yeah. It's the same thing. They're saying it's based on demand. But what happened when the market slowed down? Now they're doing, we pay 3%. They're coming by the office. They're bringing donuts. We do agent bonuses. It's all based on the market. And when there's not a lot of inventory, they feel like they can do that and get away with it. And agents will still go and they'll get the $3,000. If they don't have a buyer agency agreement, then they won't. That's all they'll get is the $3,000. Again, you could open doors for clients, for customers, and you could have conversation with buyers on the services you provide. But it was very lackadaisical, I'll say. And then most states only required that disclosure. Like for Maryland, they would have the understanding whom agents represent that you would provide. In open houses, you have the sign that says the agent on duty is not representing you as a buyer. That agent represents the seller. And then they changed a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, when they went away with you used to have to deliver the understanding whom agents represent to both sides. I mean, whether they signed or whether they didn't, you still had to deliver it. They changed it where you only had to deliver it to people if they didn't sign. Even though our office policy was just give it to everyone. That way you don't have to worry about it. So people don't get confused. Which basically says, so by default now, all agents in Maryland represent the seller by default, unless they're hired by the buyer. So again, this is just the paperwork that solidifies that. And moving forward, so no offer of buyer brokerage compensation at MLS. You can put it on your website, on your personal website. So I've already seen agents already adapting to this. They have a website, melvinyates.com/compensation. And on that one landing page will be all of Melvin's active listings and the compensation that the seller is offering for each of those, on full display. Sellers may offer concession. So again, it's just a workaround this. So they'll say concession, but they can't say buyer compensation. Then the buyer can use that concession for whatever he or she chooses to use it for, which may include compensation to his or her agent. Now, one thing that's important to note is that just because the seller is offering compensation, the seller could be offering 2.5% or 3% or 5%. If that seller buyer agent compensation is not specifically outlined in the contract, there's no compensation to the buyer's agent. So this is going to happen. So so it's just like commercial real estate. There's no compensation listed. Hey, I have a client that's interested to buy your building. What's the compensation? They say, it's X percent. Okay, great. You send over an agreement. It says an understanding of terms that if my client buys the building, I'm going to show it. If my client buys the building, you've already agreed you're going to pay EXP X percent. And then you show it. And if they write the offer, you include it in the contract. If it is not included in the contract, then there's no compensation. So agents will forget. Agents will learn the lesson the hard way, where they're going to write up contracts. They've had a conversation with the agent that said, yeah, my seller's paying 3%. I say, great. You get a good one, 3%. They're going to write up the contract. They're going to submit it. The contract's going to get accepted, and in that contract will be no mention of the 3% due to the brokerage. So then it doesn't exist. It doesn't matter how it was advertised if it's not a part of the contract. So that's a part of it must be asked for in the contract part. And of course, it's subject to open negotiation. And the buyer agent cannot get paid more. So if the seller is offering 3% to the buyer's agent, but the buyer agency agreement says 2.5%, then 2.5% is what you can get. And that's all you can put in the contract. If you ask for the full 3%, then that extra 0.5% is going to kick over to your client, to the buyer. You don't get to keep that extra because your agreement was for 2.5%. You can't get paid more. It's the same thing as leaving it blank. You know, where agents would just leave it blank and don't worry, I work for free. You know, they'll pay me. So same thing. Let's see, buyer brokers negotiate the fee and service prior to showing a property. You have to have a signed agreement before the showing. So like you mentioned, you'll either have a 1-day showing, a 48-hour, or 6-month. Can't say free, can't leave it open, can't say, oh, don't worry, I'll get paid whatever the seller's paying, can't say that. And there can't be any requirement of unilateral compensation. And sellers can negotiate buyer to buyer. So just because they're offering 3% to Corey doesn't mean they have to offer 3% to Melvin. Well, no, each one is negotiated. It's an offer. Basically, it's a package. So Corey is submitting an offer to the seller on behalf of his client that says, this is our price, this is our closing date, this is our type of financing, this is the seller concession that they need for seller help, and this is the commission that I need for my broker. Like, it's a whole bundle. And the seller will accept it, reject it, or counter, and they'll negotiate or not. When Melvin submits an offer, it's going to be a different price, a different seller help, it's different closing date, a different lender. I don't like Bank of America. I prefer Wells Fargo. Whatever all of that is, that's a part of the bundle. And the seller can decide, yeah, no, I like this bundle, but I don't like this bundle at 3%. I'll pay 2%. Or you know what, I'll pay 0 to the agent. Because you're offering $20,000 less than what I'm asking. So I'm not willing to give that and pay your agent. Do you understand? That's the, how it's going to be. Each negotiation is separate. But it still has to be a part of the offer. Because the listing agreement will outline what the seller is paying to the listing brokerage. We're talking about buyer compensation. Could be coming soon, like pre-coming soon. So right now with coming soon listings, and that's the EXP exclusive listings you're talking about, right? Okay. Yeah, I'll cover that. So again, asking for the concession in the contract, verbiage to consider. So in your contract, this is a sample verbiage that you would use or could consider using. Seller to credit buyer brokerage $20,000 at settlement to satisfy buyer's contractual agreement with buyer's broker. So that would be that's sample language that you could use in your contract on a general addendum or in additional terms, and then the seller's going to say, oh, no, I know I said originally $20,000, but I think I'm going to change it to $15,000. And that's something that's negotiable. Whatever that difference is, your buyer client's paying the difference. I mean, that's what the contract says. Or you're going to be dropping it down and waiving it, again, with your broker's permission. And so, again, treating your buyers like you treat your sellers. We all know that listings are golden. Listing agents last, as they say. The listing. We've always had this, chicken or the egg conversation, and most people believe that the listings come first, and then the buyers. But buyers agents, people that are heavy on the buy side, would say, well, you wouldn't have sold your house if it wasn't for my buyer. But this, I guess, shows that you have to have a listing. And the listings are generating the opportunities. And so we do all this. We beg, borrow, steal almost to get listings, and we're doing all this work to get a listing. Treat your buyers the same way. Give them the full presentation, explain everything to them, and you'll be covered. The way our paper, the way we've done our roadmaps and our presentation is already exactly. Yeah, we've been practicing for a long time. And I'll say this, I won't even take credit for this, because I learned this from Craig Proctor from like 2005-ish. Craig Proctor was the #1 RE/MAX agent in the world for a bunch of years. And he had, in his presentation, and that's when I started learning it, he did the same thing. This is our fee, and this is the flat fee. And in fact, he would teach to get the flat fee up front. So he would charge, you would collect the $495 or the $395 or whatever it was up front to even start working with the buyer. Now he had so many leads and so much, and people would pay it. And I did it a couple times, but that's where it just was outside of my comfort zone. I did it a few times and it worked, and people would pay the money. I was like, wow, people paid up front. So I do it now for tenants, but I stopped doing that with buyers. I just, but again, it's all perception. It's all what we, our circle of what we feel comfortable, and if it's outside that, we don't feel comfortable, so then we're not confident when we speak about it. And there's going to be over the next 24 months, assuming this goes through, there's going to be a whole marketplace of different models. You're going to see agents that'll say, I charge $9.99 flat fee. Buyers agents that say, I charge a flat $5,000 and you only pay X dollars up front, or I charge $9.99 and $100 per house I show you. There are going to be a whole bunch of different things, and then they're going to try to, and then 18 months, 24 months from now, there'll be kind of a main way that most people are doing it, and most people will go that way. And again, the United States, as you said, JB, is the only country that does it this way. In Europe, everywhere else in the world, South America, their buyers do not have buyers want to buy a house, they go to the listing agent. And the listing agent just helps with the paperwork. That's the way it's done in most of the world. They have buyer consultants. They don't have they don't have buyer representation. If a buyer wants representation, then he or she hires a lawyer. I mean, do you understand? They go to a law firm or they pay whatever the fee is. If they just want someone to open the door, then they pay for that. I mean, but the United States has their own kind of system, and just because this is the way we've always done it, doesn't mean that that's the way it's supposed to be. I mean, we had slavery for a long time, and there was nothing wrong with that, right? During the time, that's what people said. That was what it was, right? And there were a bunch of people, and the majority of the population didn't see anything wrong with it. Do you understand? That didn't mean it was right. It's just the way that it was. And then, you know what I mean? I mean, that's a different analogy, but it's, you understand what I'm saying? It's the way that it was. And so a lot of people are saying, well, why do we have to change? You know how many people were upset with that change? But it was necessary, right? All right, and we're gonna close out. I'm gonna close this out. So again, treating your buyers like your sellers. Okay, and what you can do today, what you can do right now. Refining your buyer strategy session. What is your process? How do you meet with the first time? Do you meet at the property, over the phone, at Starbucks? Just knowing what your approach is, knowing what your strategy is. And again, and every customer is not going to be your client. You know what I mean? But right now, and often especially if you don't have a ton of business, you're holding on to every client like the little kid holding mom's leg in the grocery store as she's dragging him through. Being okay that this client maybe isn't for me. Being okay with that. If they give you a hard time, because sometimes how people act, I mean, how people act up front is kind of how they're going to act the whole way. If they're going to fight tooth and nail and argue about everything, then maybe, I don't know, just maybe. Do you articulate that value on your website? Explaining the process, updating your resume with showing your expertise, number of contracts written and accepted the first time, average number of homes shown to find the right one, closing days average, or average amount of money saved by a client. All the things to position yourself as an expert, things that we should be doing anyway. And that's why we see an abundance of, in terms of market share, teams getting more, we could do more together, teams getting more market share than individual agents. I mean, we've seen that's been a trend over the past, probably 8 years, where you're seeing solo agents that are just independent solo agents doing less business than, just teams gobbling up more of that market share. That's all. Working with sellers, take a look at your listing presentation, helping people get beyond the headlines. There's a lot of doom and gloom and fear that's happening. You have to be You have to be the rock. You have to be, you know, everyone can't. I mean, we used this example before. If you're on a plane and there's turbulence happening, if the stewardess running down the aisle screaming, I'm telling you, I don't know what I would do. But I always look, you can't write. You don't want the pilot screaming, everybody, oh my God. If the pilot comes on the speaker, oh my God, everybody's gonna freak out. You need, somebody's gotta be in charge. And right now, that somebody is you.